Welcome everyone to the CELPIP Reading Part 4 Understanding Viewpoints Analysis. Now I'm just here in the CELPIP library in Part 4. And before we get started, I do want to remind you that Reading Part 4 focuses more on CLB 7 plus or higher. What does that mean? Well, that means that if you need to get CLB 7 or higher, 8 or 9 for example, then you need to do well in part 4 because part 4 will be the most challenging part for higher levels. Okay, reading part 1, 2, those parts are very easy, and usually level 7 or higher, they get everything correct in parts 1 and 2. Okay, but in part 4, it will be more complicated. That's because the reading texts will be more complicated with higher level English expression and vocabulary, and the questions will also be more difficult to answer. Okay, so higher levels, they should do well and they should get more points in part 4. Now, if you need to get CLB 4, 5, or 6, this part will be very difficult, okay? Because it will be more difficult English and vocabulary and ideas to understand for lower levels. And usually, just to give you an example, level 5, usually they get 0 in this part, okay? And CLB 6, they might get 1 or 2, okay? But level 5 or 4, they get 0 in this part. So that's because, again, it's much more difficult English readings and questions and vocabulary. Okay, so CLB 4, 5, or 6, you need to do well in part 1 and 2. That's where you need to do well because that is the easier readings and questions. Okay, I hope that's clear. Now, secondly, I want to remind you about our Reading Understanding Viewpoints Tips and Strategies video. This video will give you a really detailed analysis of what reading strategies you can use, okay? How you can read effectively, how to read the questions, how to answer the questions, and some of the tips and strategies that I will be using in this analysis, they are explained in this video. So if you need that kind of knowledge, then please watch that tips and strategies video, and I will leave a link in the description box, okay? So now let's get started with today's analysis called Food Insecurity. Okay, so here we are in the front page of this sample, and you'll notice that this sample lesson will include 5 parts, okay? The video we are watching right now, okay? And then we have some vocabulary building. Now, vocabulary building is a great way for you to improve your vocabulary. And this vocabulary comes from the reading that we will analyze. So we have some words or some good words for you to keep in mind. Inequality, diagnose, nutritious. Words that if you don't know, well, or if you need to review them, here they are. The word, the basic meaning, synonyms, and antonyms. Very good for building. And then even better after that, you have this great vocabulary building. How do you do it? Well, you read the sentence, and then you should write a word from the list in here. Which word will complete this sentence? Okay, and so on. And that's a great way for you to build your vocabulary. Great exercise. And then we have comprehension building. Comprehension building. Now, comprehension building, it's a exercise that will improve your ability to understand ideas better and differentiate between ideas, because that's something that you need to do in part 4. So you read the idea A, you read idea B, and then you have to try to say, do they agree or disagree with each other? It's a very good tool for helping you build your comprehension. Okay, everyone, and I strongly recommend that kind of building comprehension exercise. And then we have test practice 1, which we're going to analyze right now. And then after that, we have test practice 2. Test practice 2 will help you review the reading that we did and answer questions, but it's a different version. It's version 2 of this exam. Most CELPIP exams have different versions, okay? So it's a great way for you to review what we studied. Okay, everyone. So now let's get started with today's analysis. All right, and here we are. Okay, so everyone, you'll notice that this is the same format as the real exam. We have our reading on the left, and we have our questions on the right. And it's almost an identical format. The only difference, and we have our time over here, the only difference will be just the way that the answers are laid out. Here we have the question and then the answers underneath. In the real exam, you have the questions just next to it, but it's still multiple choice, same format. And also in here, we have to fill in the blank. And here we have 6, 7, 8. Now for the answers, they are here at the bottom. The answer selection, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, etc. But in the real exam, when you press the number 6, your answer options will be there. I find that to be a little bit confusing, actually. But I find this format to be better. But in the real exam, again, when you click 6, the answer options will appear there. But in our exam, they are here. Okay? And also, we have our time over here. We have 13 minutes to complete part 4, okay? Now, I'm just going to give you a few tips about how we can answer that in 13 minutes or what we can do to manage our time effectively. One thing to do is to always keep an idea of what the questions are like. Some questions are very direct, like paragraph 1 mainly focuses about, you see? Okay, and this one here is about Dr. Patricia. So where is Dr. Patricia here? And then in paragraph 3, what does that mean? And then paragraph 4, what's the main point? So usually it's very direct, the questions, and it's very important. So that's the first part about managing time. We should read the paragraph, check the questions. 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 We need to know clearly always what the questions are about, okay? So that's the first thing that we can keep in mind. And then the second part that I want to say it's a good way for us to read effectively is to focus more on ideas, not vocabulary. This confuses students many times. Many times students get confused because they see similar vocabulary. Over here, we're going to find minimum wage, for example. Somewhere over here I see minimum wage, you see? Lower level students, and by lower level, I mean even 7, they might not completely understand the idea and they'll just try to match vocabulary. Okay? But we need to make sure that we read the full idea, not just match vocabulary. This is very important. Here is the full idea, and then over here, we need to understand that full idea with the vocabulary, okay? So that's very important. It's an idea test, not a vocabulary test only, okay? Vocabulary is important. There's lots of higher level vocabulary here that you need to know, but it's not a vocabulary test. No, okay? All right. And then the other idea that I want to give you is that we need to understand clearly viewpoints. All right, viewpoints. Here we have different viewpoints, all right? And we need to make sure that we understand how they are different, how they are the same, because the questions, sometimes they ask questions exactly about agree, disagree, how are the viewpoints the same? Sometimes not. I see here that they don't really ask that question, but most of the times they do. And in particular, in questions 6 to 10, this is another viewpoint. And so this viewpoint here is going to be trying to connect to these viewpoints here in some way. So we really need to understand what are the different viewpoints. This is very important, okay? And then the last part that I think is important is about time. And we should give ourselves at least 3 or 4 minutes to complete the last part. It's very important. Okay? I would say 4 minutes. 4 minutes would be good because sometimes this paragraph here, which is complete the text, it can be very confusing. So make sure that it's not going to be something where it's very easy to match and match. No, we need to give ourselves enough time. And I would say 4 minutes, 3 to 4 minutes will be very important. Okay, all right. Well, I hope those tips and strategies are useful for you. Now let's get started with today's analysis. Okay, so I do want to say that we are going to be doing this analysis together. And we're not going to be doing it in 13 minutes, okay? I've taken the time off there. I'm going to try to read it and explain things to you, okay? And I'm going to try to, read the questions and the answers, and I'm going to give you a chance to try to answer for yourself. Okay, while we are analyzing, I'm trying to explain to you more clearly some ideas and answers to build your comprehension, okay? So, and also along the way, I'm going to be explaining some vocabulary and ideas so we can understand better. All right, but I am going to be giving you a chance to answer. So let's get started, okay? So I'm just going to zoom in here, and here we go. Nova Scotia households report among the highest rates of food insecurity in the country, according to a Nova Scotia-based study recently published in the Canadian Journal of Public Health. Well, believe it or not, but yes, we do have food insecurity in Canada. As some of you may know, we do have a large homeless population. Now, it's not necessarily because of poverty, like in other countries, but it's mostly because of employment, inflation, high costs these days, right? So those are mainly the reasons. And other issues that probably they'll explain here, okay? So food insecurity, not having enough food or maybe not having the right food. And Halifax had the highest rate among big cities, with 1 in 5 households at risk in danger. The Nova Scotia study comes as the percentage of Canadians on minimum wage continues to climb, and amid a North America-wide debate about tying minimum wage to inflation to better address the growing concern about the issue of income inequality. Okay, amid means it's happening. So they're having a debate about connecting minimum wage with inflation, okay? And they're trying to understand this. Okay, and also income inequality, it does exist as well in Canada, particularly, of course, between the middle class and the low income, okay? There is a difference between average income and low income. Okay. As economists, academics, and activists debate the causes and consequences of growing income inequality, the most basic of issues remains the ability to put food on the table. Not wieners and macaroni, but nutritious food for optimal health outcomes. Okay, so you see, they're saying not talking about wieners or hot dogs and macaroni. It's not about regular plain food, but nutritious food. So that's important. Okay, so the main focus of this passage, well, probably we don't know it yet. Let's wait to answer that one till the end because it's about the main focus. But what about this one? Paragraph 1 mainly focuses on, okay, food insecurity in Nova Scotia, food insecurity and its link to nutritional deficits, a recent Canadian Journal of Public Health study, food insecurity and its link to income inequality. Well, what do we think? Well, it's definitely not food insecurity in Nova Scotia because it does tie, it says Nova Scotia has the highest rate, but it's across Canada, so not A, okay? And also not C because it's not only about the Canadian Journal. It's not about that Canadian Journal at all, actually. So not A. So B or C? Very close, these two, but it should be D because they're trying to connect food insecurity and income inequality. Now, it does mention nutritional deficits, but deficits means not having enough nutrition. It does mention that, but basically it's trying to connect, like it says here, minimum wage, saying the growing concern of income inequality and food insecurity. That is the main point there, right there. Okay? Number 3 is about Dr. Patricia Williams, paragraph 3. We didn't read it, and the main point of 4. So let's continue reading. Let's continue with paragraph 2. We often think that if you're employed full-time, you should be able to meet all your basic needs. But our research shows that it's still a problem, says Dr. Patricia Williams. The Mount St. Vincent University professor who co-wrote the report, Kelly, 37, who doesn't want her name used, suffers from anxiety and depression as she struggles daily to provide nutritious food for her kids, scanning for deals on chicken and ground beef and relying on the monthly food bank. Depending on, struggles, it's difficult for her. So it says here that this example of Kelly is an example of the type of person that has this food insecurity. Okay, one of the reasons, like we see here, people who have mental health issues, they suffer from this issue. Okay. On Thursday night, she served her family spaghetti with meat sauce. Friday night was leftovers, so food that remains. Once a week, there is a hot dog and craft dinner night, and for another meal, she will serve either chicken thighs or legs because they are the cheapest. Okay, so there's an example of the type of food that is considered maybe, well, I guess the examples they're saying here is that this food is not so nutritious, and also she might get it from the food bank. Well, I can tell you, even though many people like craft dinner, it's not that healthy, okay? And it's not clear exactly about spaghetti with meat sauce. I mean, I love it, but maybe it's not so nutritious, okay? So, Dr. Patricia Williams suggests that, we read about her over here, even full-time workers are at risk of food insecurity. Unemployed people with depression are at the highest risk of food insecurity. Mental health problems are a key contributing factor to food insecurity. And being employed full-time allows you to meet all your basic needs. What do you think? Okay, well, it's not B. Unemployed people with depression are at highest risk. It's just an example. It says Kelly is an example and she has that, but it's not that they are at the highest risk. Also, it's not C for the same reason. It's not just that mental health contributes to that. I mean, it could, but that's not what Dr. Patricia Williams suggests, okay? So A or B. It should be A. Even full-time workers are at risk of food insecurity. And it says here that we think that if you're employed full-time, you should be able to provide nutritious food. But Dr. Patricia Williams gives this example, or that it's still a problem. Even being full-time, it says, is a problem, okay? So even full-time workers are at risk in Canada, even full-time workers, okay? So let's see here the next paragraph. According to the Nova Scotia study, a single mother with 3 children in the province earning the minimum wage will be nearly $500 in the red every month if she were to purchase nutritional food that after paying for other basic living costs such as rent, heat, and hydro. Okay, will be nearly $500 in the red. It means that you're negative, you have a deficit. Okay, we often associate red with something negative, okay? So you'll be $500 short even if you work full-time with earning the minimum wage, okay? A family of 4, meanwhile, with 2 adults working for minimum wage would face a monthly deficit of $44.89. The study looked at minimum wage data from 2002 to 2014, okay, and used a National Nutritious Food Basket, a Health Canada measurement of 67 foods easily found in grocery stores, eaten by Canadians and considered nutritionally balanced to cost of food. And it concluded that the risk of food insecurity is a critical public health issue for low wage earners. Okay, so here what it's trying to do is trying to say that you could be working for the minimum wage full-time and you would have a monthly deficit, or could have a monthly deficit, okay? It is looking at a family of 4. So for families, that's definitely true, I think. So I saw the question here, question 3, the phrase in the red means, okay, we have it over here, in the red. What does that mean? Under budget, in debt, in the bank, owed in taxes. Well, it's definitely not in the bank or owed in taxes. I didn't mention those two. Now, under budget or in debt? In debt, right? Now, because under budget would mean that you have enough. Because let's say you have $500 for food and you only spend $400, you're under budget. But in the red means that you have a deficit or you're going to be in debt or you owe. Okay? Very interesting. Now the main point. So let's get to paragraph 4. Dr. Valerie Tarasuk, a professor at the University of Toronto's Department of Nutritional Sciences, has done significant research on food insecurity and the consequences for Canadians' health and on the healthcare system. If we look at any point in time, people exposed to food insecurity are in worse health and they are less able to manage their health problems. So they are absolutely costing the taxpayer money, she says. We can see that people who are food insecure are more likely to report having been diagnosed with a whole range of chronic conditions. Well, serious health problems. So, Dr. Valerie Tarsak is bringing the point of health, and people who are exposed to food insecurity, they have worse health. So we can see, well, I think that's clear. There's a connection between those two because if you don't eat healthy, then you will have bad health, okay? So let's get to the main point of paragraph 4 is that food insecurity has serious health consequences for poor people. The problem of food insecurity is getting worse. Food insecurity doesn't just hurt the poorest people in society. The health system is unable to deal with the problem of food insecurity. So then, what do you think? Well, I can tell you that it's not B, okay? The paragraph didn't really focus on getting worse. Remember that paragraph talked a lot about health, okay? So, and the connection between food insecurity and health, not about getting worse. And also, hmm, also not D. Now, it did mention about the healthcare system, but not unable to deal with the problem of food insecurity. It didn't say that it can't deal with it. It just said that people who are food insecure, they could have more chronic diseases and they need more health care, okay? So, food insecurity doesn't just hurt the poorest people in society. Food insecurity has serious health consequences for poor people. Hmm. Very difficult, these two, but I think the answer should be C. Now, why? It didn't really talk about poor people. It talked about food insecurity. But also, I see here the poorest people, but doesn't just hurt the poorest people in society. The reason for that, if we look at any point in time, people exposed to food insecurity are in worse health and they are less able to manage their health problems. And then, key. So they are absolutely costing the taxpayer money. So if people are food insecure, they are unhealthy and they could have a range of chronic conditions, and then they need more health care, and that costs the taxpayer money. The taxpayer is regular people that are not food insecure. So, in this way, food insecurity doesn't just hurt the poor people or the people who are food insecure, it affects all of society, okay? And not just has serious health consequences for poor people. I think we know that, okay? So, and it doesn't really say about just the serious health consequences for poor people. It doesn't mention those. So very hard, that one, but I think it's trying to say that food insecurity affects everyone, even the taxpayer, not just the people who are food insecure. Okay? What about number one? The main focus of this passage is why food insecurity is a complicated problem with no easy solutions. How minimum wage earnings prevent people from eating healthy food. How food insecurity is a growing problem with serious consequences. Why people with food insecurity are at greater risk of health problems. So, well, it's not A, right? Because it didn't really talk about the solutions. Didn't focus on what solutions could be good, which ones are difficult. There's no easy answer. No. Also, it's not B because it doesn't say that minimum wage earners prevent people from eating healthy food. It doesn't say that they prevent. No, it's a mix up in words there. It could be minimum wage could prevent low income people or them to eat unhealthy. Okay? So, it's a growing problem with serious consequences, or why people with food insecurity are at greater risk of health problems. Should be C, right? It's a growing problem with serious consequences, not only about health problems. That was paragraph 4 only. But in general, it tried to tell us it's a problem with serious consequences, okay? All right, so it looks like we got questions 1 to 5. Now for questions 6 to 10. So let's remember that this is someone's opinion about this article. So another point of view. So we need to try to connect the ideas sentence by sentence. Let's keep in mind, everyone, that we need to focus on the meaning of each sentence because each sentence could speak about one part of that article. Okay, so very important to understand the meaning sentence by sentence. Okay, and even a little more ahead. So let's see here. Being from a fortunate middle class family, I am often sick when I see ads pertaining to the poverty stricken children around the world suffering from malnourishment. Malnourishment, not having nutritious food or enough food. Poverty stricken children, so children living in very bad conditions. So I am often something, so it sounds like how do they feel? They're from a fortunate middle class family. How do they feel when they see this image? Disheartened, astounded, unperturbed, incredulous. So, not astounded. Astounded can be like very surprised or shocked. Unperturbed, not bothered. Well, I don't think it's not bothered. I think most people feel some kind of sadness. Okay? Incredulous, don't care about it. So, disheartened, sadness. I'm disheartened. I feel sad. I feel bad, which is how most people feel when they see these images. Okay? So, this article has certainly left me in shock. After learning that the reality of such tragedies is 7 than I initially figured. So initially I thought something about those tragedies, but now I'm in shock because these tragedies is 7. These tragedies then. much more severe, much more complicated, much closer to home, much further afield. So these tragedies, not more severe because initially they thought they were very bad, or not more complicated because I think everyone knows this is a complicated situation, or in the beginning they said they feel sad about this situation, so they know it's complicated and severe. So according to this article, where is this happening? In the third world? No, much closer to home, not far away, much closer to home. It's in Canada. And even for myself, that kind of surprises me too. So, yes, because it's much closer to home, I feel shocked after learning that the reality of such tragedies is much closer to home than I initially figured. Also, everyone, while you're doing this part, I want to give you another strategy. You should be reading, making sure that everything is making sense. Now, in the real exam, you will have the answer posted there as you choose it. Over here, we don't, but you can read along as well. Naturally, being Canadian, I would want to shift my to food banks, my something to food banks. I want to shift something to food banks in the province to sympathize with my fellow Canadians. So I'll feel sorry for them. I want to understand them. I want to help them. So I want to shift my what to food banks. Understanding, consciousness, support, opinion should be support. I want to support the food banks so people can go there, people who need it can go there, and they can get help. They can get food. Not just understanding, or consciousness means being aware about the problem. But we don't want to be aware to the food banks. We want to support the food banks. So, naturally, being Canadian, I would want to shift my support to food banks in the province to sympathize with my fellow Canadians. On the other hand, however, I am completely flabbergasted, shocked, or angry shocked at the reality that such conditions could possibly exist in our so called first world nation. That's true. Why is this happening in Canada, which is a first world nation? So that's why they are flabbergasted, because it's happening here. 9, I am appalled, so angry, shocked and angry, that the governments of such provinces could tolerate the incidence of such an essential and basic need of our citizens as nutritional food. And therefore, I advocate for making this our. So I'm flabbergasted. Sounds like a connector here. What kind of connector? Flabbergasted and appalled. Additional, probably. And more than anything, however, in other words, nevertheless. So, not however or nevertheless, because those also mean however or but. And here it says, I'm flabbergasted and appalled. And more than anything, I am appalled. Right. So, in more than anything, I'm appalled that the governments of these provinces are not doing anything and they're just tolerating it, letting it happen, accepting it. The incidence, or how much it happens, of such an essential and basic need of our citizens as nutritional food, and therefore, and so, I advocate, or I make a voice or support, speak for making this our. So this is happening, it's terrible, and I want to make this our urgent matter for discussion, focus for future legislation, priority grassroots action, immediate legislative mandate. So, not C, right? This is not a grassroots issue. grassroots is something that's cultural, something new, something about your history. So it doesn't sound like food insecurity is about grassroots. Okay, also not urgent matter, yes, but not for discussion because we just discussed it. We discussed it over here. So not discussion. So future legislation, focus for future legislation or immediate legislative mandate. So D, D, everyone. D, I advocate for making this our immediate legislative mandate, something we want to do immediately. We want immediate government action or laws, not future legislation or policies. Okay? We want immediate action. Okay? So, very good, everyone. Looks like we got everything. Very interesting topic. I feel like, well, now you know that it also happens in Canada, food insecurity. Okay, everyone? All right, so I think we got all the answers over here. Okay. All right, very good. Now, everyone, to practice. How can we practice? Well, the first thing we can do is review the answers. Maybe you didn't get the answers right. So we need to review the answers and we need to understand why the answer is the answer and why the other answers are not the answers. This is very important, everyone. And you could review the test again and just focus on that. It will really help you build your comprehension. Secondly, well, we need to review the reading. Review the reading. Make sure we understand the ideas, the vocabulary. Okay, that's very important. If we can understand everything about this reading clearly, you will understand all readings because we have a similar way of expressing ideas. And lots of this vocabulary in here will be in other parts too. So very important to review the reading and the vocabulary, okay? And so for that, everyone, we have vocabulary building. Vocabulary building, like I mentioned earlier, it's a great exercise to improve our vocabulary. And comprehension building as well. Let's remember that comprehension building is very strong. We read the ideas and we have to decide if they agree with each other, these ideas. And that's a very good tool, everyone, to build your comprehension. And lots of our sample lessons, they include comprehension building, okay? And also, lastly, version 2. Version 2 of this exam would be great to practice. We have the reading again and different questions. Different questions. This is the best way to review what we just read. So I strongly recommend it. And everyone, I will be leaving a link in the description box to the sample lesson. Okay, so you can practice. Then everyone, let's not forget to subscribe to the CELPIP library. Now, our CELPIP library includes over 60 examples of reading part 4. That's a great tool to have for you to practice. Okay, and with version 2s, you could have about 100 examples. So very great, everyone. I strongly recommend to subscribe to the CELPIP library. And so, with discount code CELPIP79, discount code CELPIP79, you can get a 3-month subscription to CELPIP library, 3 months, for only $10.99, everyone. That's a great deal. Don't forget that our CELPIP library includes all of the CELPIP exams, different versions, and more. Okay? So that's about 90 days, and you have about 100 exams. So you will definitely build your knowledge, okay, everyone? So I strongly recommend to subscribe to the CELPIP library. And let's not forget, practice makes perfect.